Ladies and gentlemen, to moderate our last color of conversation, please welcome Oramide Tinubu.
My name is Oramide Tinubu. I am a TV critic with Variety, and I am thrilled, so thrilled, to introduce you guys to a beautiful panel of people who made this beautiful series come to life. You guys have just watched Seen and Heard. The 2 parts will be available on HBO soon, or HBO Max as they're calling it now. But for now, I want to introduce you to our illustrious panel. So first, I have Phil Bertelsen, who is a director and producer on the series. Next, we have Giselle Bailey, who is also a director and producer on the series. Next, we have executive producer Montreal McKay. And finally, an executive producer, you know her work, Issa Rae. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Your mics are in your chairs if you need them. So we're so excited to get into such a beautiful work. This is about the history of Black representation on television. We've kind of seen it through the first part, you kind of see it through the early aughts, and then currently into to the 21st century is what we've just seen in the second part, Heard. So I want to dive right in and ask all of you, what inspired this series and what made you want to tell it through the lens of television specifically and not through film and television or film?
I can start. Hey, everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming through and watching the film. The medium of television has always been super special to me. I grew up on television, and especially 90s TV, and that's what inspired me to try to start writing. Like, my first body of work was a teleplay based off of the new Cosby Show that came out on CBS, and there's just something about being seen and seeing yourself represented and then aspiring. And I was always curious about what came before. I know that I stand on the shoulders of so many incredible creatives, but, Montreal drummed up, and in collaboration with our group here, just this idea to present the legacy of Black television in this way. So I'll let them talk about it. But that's what excited me, was just being able to showcase whose shoulders we stand on.
For me, books opened up my world, but there's nothing like seeing yourself reflected on television. And I was talking to Shireen yesterday from Warner Brothers, and we were talking about how the Cosby Show, I grew up blue-collar Midwest, right? So I didn't see Black doctors, lawyers, all that stuff. But the Cosby Show, seeing that, it's TV, but for me, it was like, damn, that's possible. I went to Morehouse because of a different world. You know what I mean? And, people who, when you're able to see yourself, you're able to dream, you're able to see what's possible besides what's in front of you, it's powerful. And these characters, I wanted to cry. I didn't because I'm a G, but I wanted to cry. When The Fresh Prince ended, when Will was in that living room by himself, it's like, damn, this family that I watched every Monday, it's over. You know what I mean? So those relationships you build is unique to us. And the internet has kind of fragmented it now, but we all grew up. I'm my sons, they text now, and it's all GIFs and memes. And I'm like, our social currency was quotes from TV shows and movies, you know what I mean? And they don't have that. And I feel like that's a shared experience that we wanted to give to audiences.
What about you, Giselle and Phil, as directors?
Sure. I would just say that for me, in this moment of social media and instant gratification, this idea that we are all stars of our own movie and show, that it would be interesting to look back. I'm a student of history. in particular a film historian named Donald Bogle, who wrote a book called Toms, Coons, Mulattoes, Mammies, and Bucks. If y'all haven't read it yet, check it out. But I knew that this age of instant imagery came from a place. This idea that we can control our own image started somewhere, and we stand on the shoulders of folk who worked hard and suffered and faced great degradation and stereotypes, and to take control of that, harness that power like Issa and so many have in this time and place. I thought it would be good time to look back and come forward. Amos and Andy to Insecure. So that's how this whole thing started for me.
I was really excited, one, to get a master class, in making impactful television, to understand what it takes to really create something that is long-lasting, that shapes the way that we see ourselves, and also how to do that in a climate that's ever-changing in terms of the industry. Like, how did the ones before us do it, and how do the ones doing it now do it? And so that was what was most exciting for me, and I think it was exciting as well to be able to work with this team, work with another director, Phil, who is such a historian, and really build into the present and the future of where we're going with television.
So speaking of the present and the future and the past, Heard is about sort of coming back after this moment of erasure. But we kind of seem to be back in a moment of erasure. So for you, Issa, do you feel like we are in a place where Black stories are no longer being seen as they were on television?
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately. We go through these cycles and we talk about these cycles. I always tell this story about being excited to be, when I was first starting Awkward Black Girl, we were in another dearth of Black television, and I was so excited that my work was being seen online and shared, and I got invited to speak on a panel, and I called my mom, and I was like, "Oh, Mom, they asked me to speak on a panel," and she was like, "What? That's amazing. What's the panel discussion?" And I was like, "Oh, it's just about how, we're in a new era and there's a lack of representation and diversity on the television screens." And she was like, "Girl, we were talking about that in the 70s, we were talking about that in the 80s, we were talking about that in the 90s, but great, yay, you're on a panel." And now we're back again. And it really is, we go through these waves and we're always talking about the change, but what I love about this documentary is, I feel, even now, even having been a part of it, and every time I watch it, I get inspired, and there's an opportunity and an awareness around it in a different way, where it just feels like we're more inspired and emboldened to own these spaces, and we can hold each other accountable for that. And so I still feel optimistic, I still feel inspired, and them taking those steps, honestly.
Wonderful. Now for you, Giselle, there's such a wealth of sort of archival footage in both parts of the series. And what's interesting to me is that we don't often think of television as a new medium, but it's pretty new. It's not 100 years old yet as we know it. So how did you guys decide what to include? Because there's not a lot of us all the time, but we have a lot of history within the medium. So how did you both decide what to include in the series?
For me, I just know that when I'm watching shows that we've created, I feel like you just see such expansiveness of Black life. And a lot of the things that I've seen in the past are kind of niche, like it's about one specific thing. And I really wanted to show all the ways and all the brilliant creatives across time. Heard is very much about people, doing it today, but the breadth of what that can look like. And also I was really interested in tracking the kind of hidden histories where, I love the story of Lena, Tamara, to Debbie, like how we're kind of passing the baton in real time. So that was another thing that was really important. And then lastly, I think it's just to tell stories that are very much rooted not just in pop culture, but first in Black culture. So when we're talking about like HBCUs or even with Pose, like the ballroom scene, these underground spaces that then come on TV and just shift the way we see ourselves. Do you?
Well, I would just add the thing about being seen and heard is that the clips themselves from the shows say a lot about the period from which they come, and that they don't exist in a vacuum. They're in the context of protest and agitation. And in fact, we began this film during the summer of 2020. And you know what was going on in the streets and in your homes. You were all locked down, you know, looking to talk to other adults. And we had the opportunity to sit folks down, you know, remotely and distantly, which is why you see them sitting outside a lot of times, but really expressing their frustration and their future promise for what that moment, you know, allows. And so to kind of keep the stories within the context of the moment, I think is always real important. So you'll see, you know, protests and the period in which those images emerged as something that is representative too of who we are. Yeah.
Now for you, Montreal, we see a ton of people are talking about their experiences working in the industry. Is there somebody that you knew you had to have, and is there someone you wanted to have as a team, but you could not make their schedule work or whatever the case may be?
I'm glad you asked that. They all know, for me, it was Oprah, because, you know, everybody knows her story, but a big part of her life was in Milwaukee, where I'm from, and there you go. And so if you're from Milwaukee...
He didn't even say it, like, Milwaukee. He said Milwaukee. So, just like...
She always giving me... But anybody who's from Milwaukee, as my guy over here knows, like, we're all on the north side of the city, and it's a very segregated place. And for Oprah to do what she did, like, to become this global figure of positivity and hope and possibility, we had to get that done. And I love Giselle for this because she brought me to Oprah's house when we filmed. And I'm in the back. I'm like, yo, I'm double dutching. I'm like, how am I going to get in there, talk to Oprah, right? And so I got cool with her hairdresser, and I'm telling her my story. She's like, you got to go talk to Oprah. And at the end of it, I ran up on her. I'm like, Oprah, I'm from Milwaukee, right? And she was like, she gave me her address. She said something like 2356 9th Street, which is like, you make it out of there, like, incredible. And then I got to take a picture, like, come here, my Milwaukee friend. You know how Oprah is. I got to take a picture, and I sent that to my grandmother, and it was the first time where I felt like she knew I was doing something. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they love Issa, but it was like seeing Oprah stamp me, and for her to be the original owner in the film and TV space. Like with Harpo, what she did in Chicago and building up Harpo, what she did with OWN, which allows so many people to have opportunities. Ava DuVernay had broke so many filmmakers with Queen Sugar who are doing huge TV and film projects now, can be traced back to her. And so as we were going through the Heard process, you know, being able to start with her and get an understanding of we need to pivot because, and they'll let them talk about it, but we quickly learned about the limitations of representation. Because the Heard part was supposed to be all about, all right, we had to fight to be seen, and now that we've been seen, we can control the stories that you're hearing from us, right? But once we got into it, it's just like, representation is not enough. If corporate infrastructure can determine which stories are being told, and if we don't have alternatives to tell our stories, you kind of get put into a box. And, you know, so that was a fun part of learning, and Oprah to me is the blueprint for that.
I love that.
But the First Lady, we tried to get the First Lady, and she tried to make it work, and it just didn't happen. But that was also a dream guess. No, 100%. In terms of, you asked, like, who we didn't get that we wanted, for sure.
She said we did get.
No, and did it.
Oh, did not. Oh, yeah, Michelle Obama.
She's right up the block, though. You want to give her. She's
I know. That's why we had the,
she's on the
talk
island.
here. Just to
and her brother lives in Milwaukee and coaches basketball with my brother. So small world.
Did you tell your mama that as well?
No, she met him.
Yeah. Okay. Now, for you, Issa, we're talking about ownership. You're someone who came into the game owning your own work. With Awkward Black Girl, like putting it up for yourself, like making people see you as you want it to be seen. What does ownership look like now in this moment?
I mean, honestly, it's about platforms, and it's also about, like, you know, the model that's very rare that Ryan Coogler was able to do with Sinners, and that's rare for all filmmakers, not just Black filmmakers. But it's just about, especially in this time, and especially as the studios and networks are trying to, are kind of even honing or scaling back in terms of what they do for content, for marketing. They're relying heavily on stars of shows. They're relying heavily on these creators. Like, you have to give up something in return. And to me, there's so many models in the television industry right now where you're making it and then you're licensing it to these people for a smaller fee. So there are models that we're exploring, but that feels like the future to me, especially as they compete with streamers and YouTube and other platforms will pop up and AI. So there's so much that we just don't know and can't expect, but we are constantly and have constantly created culture, and we need to be better gatekeepers about it. And so once we can figure that out, then the ownership is imminent.
I just want to add to that I mentioned we started rolling summer 2020. Here we are in the summer of 2025. And it should not go without saying that HBO and Warner Brothers' commitment to this project was unfailing. And they probably, between now and then, had many off-ramps. And Issa Rae and Hooray stayed the course. And here we are in this moment to represent this story at a time when I think it's, more valuable than ever. Mm-hmm. So not all corporations have caved.
Thank you for saying that. Shout out to Sarah, who's also here, and the entire HBO team for just, their persistence in getting this story told.
Yeah, and sorry, one of the things we wanted to show in the film is that there's no one way to get there, right? Like Debbie Allen said, the destination is a journey. You need people on the inside. We're at HBO. Sean is at Netflix. You need people like Byron Allen, Tyler Perry, and Oprah who own things. You need people who empower people to say, she took a story editor. It's like going from, you just became an executive, you got a promotion after a year, and now you're the CEO. She put Sarita into a showrunner position when people were like, are you crazy? And she helped shepherd her and created a new showrunner. Shonda broke so many people. Quinta Brunson came from the internet. Issa came from the internet. So there are different ways to do it. There's no one way to get there. And that's what we wanted to show. You need people like Sarah Rodriguez, who stuck with this for 5 years at HBO.
Yes,
and gave us every resource, and Lisa and Nancy, who empowered Sarah to be amazing. But you need them fighting and believing. And as we turn and try different ways to continue investing, it's all important. And we're not saying there's one way. We're just saying that we have to do more than just try to be seen in the traditional route.
I love that.
You're here.
Speaking of Debbie Allen, she spoke earlier today about sort of the fight she had to get certain things done on a different world and the type of topics that she wanted to discuss. Giselle, can you talk about sort of making sure that the vision is not only seen by the executives, but it gets on the screen? So can you talk about sort of the battle that you had as a director with that?
Sure. I think, first of all, you just have to know what you're willing to compromise on and what you're not. I think there's actually a lot of value in that feedback, understanding what people aren't understanding, what they aren't seeing, but also knowing what your audience will. So I think a lot of it is also just feeling empowered collectively by the people you choose to work with, by the audience you know that you're serving, and then through understanding what it is in the story that is true to you. And I think it sometimes, there are things that are worth the battle. I think Larry Wilmore said it really well, like understanding what's worth the battle and what's not. But ultimately, you have to know what God you serve, and I feel like that's us, that's the audience.
I love that. Phil, I think for me, what stuck out about the series is that Black people always show up for each other. Like, we've shown up for each other. We continue to show up. Even if you don't quite get it, even if it's like your mama's favorite thing and not quite your favorite thing, we try to show up for each other. And we're at a moment where, you know, with social media, with all of the things, we're more readily seen than we were in the past. We're still not, you know, hyper visible and present in many avenues. But for you, Phil, why has it been so important to continue making sure that the Black representation is at the forefront across all different genres, mediums, whatever the case may be?
Well, you know, I think it lies at the heart of why I do what I do. I think, you know, like many of us here, grew up not seeing myself on screen and knowing that we exist, and coming to an island like this every summer as much as I can, being reminded that we have economic power, we have cultural power, we have political power, and to make sure that the audience and the world knows that is really kind of at the heart of why I like to tell stories about our lives. And there's nothing like seeing these kinds of stories in front of an audience like this, where they see all the subtleties and laugh at all the funny parts and, you know, cry at all the sad parts. It's really special. And I appreciate you all showing up and representing us tonight.
So for you, Montreal, in this episode, Lena Waithe says being digestible is the opposite of freedom. And I think about this a lot, going back to Amos and Andy when the NAACP got it canceled because that's a bad representation of Blackness. Do you think it's appropriate or Black people should focus on good images of Black people?
I think we should focus on authentic images of Black people, like whatever is true to your experience, right? And so my experience is, appreciate it. My experience as a Black American, 3 out of my 4 grandparents from Mississippi, is different from Giselle's experience as a Jamaican American, right? And so the stories that I want to see, as long as I believe they're honest and come from a real place, and that we take care in building out characters with universal themes, that's what matters to me. When you start pandering, like one of the things Issa hates, she told me once, she was like, you know, I don't want the note anticipating what we think people want. I want the note for what's best for the creative, right? And what you think is true. And as long as we think it's real and it's good, then you can't get into like respectability politics, right? Because we can't shy away. Like the people on this island, like we're all here because we've had generations of people who've allowed us to kind of stand on their shoulders to get to where we are. And so if we turn around and only want to see this represented, that's not real to my family. That's not real to other people's families. And so you got to do it all. We just have to make sure it's true. And we have to make sure while we're doing it, we're bringing other people. Because the key in our game is you just need those packageable elements, right? Like having Phil and Giselle gets this thing made. Having Issa gets this made. You know, Quinta Brunson now gets stuff made, right? We just have to make sure we're bringing people with us and giving them opportunities as well to tell their version of an authentic story.
So for you, Issa, so much of what is happening right now feels out of our control just around the country. How do we as an audience and then you all as creators continue to show up?
We don't have a choice. Like when I think about what motivates me, it motivates me to tell the truth, to reach us, to show us. Like that is when I feel the most whole. And this moment in time, though frustrating, it only inspires art. You know, I think some of the best art comes out of these just fraught, terrible times, and it unites us in different ways. We see each other. It creates community. Like this is the Insecure was during the last. I mean, not to get political, but whatever, fuck it. Like that was during the last administration, and but it was terrible then and it's terrible now. So I can only imagine what other people are continuing and will create during this time, and that excites me. So we have no choice but to show up and to keep creating and to mobilize, because someone just said earlier, like, this is the way that we reach people. It's the most visible platform, quite literally, and it is the most digestible, not in the negative Lena Waithe way, but it is the most like you can understand it, you can take it, and you can you tolerate, you build, you just it inspires. So I'm hopeful.
I love that you're hopeful. I want to hold on to hope.
Hopeful for art.
Yeah,
for the art.
For that. Yeah.
No, it's important to be hopeful.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you have to realize that we've been through worse. History is always repeating, and so it's just pushing. Don't stop pushing.
So my last question before I let you all go is, what was the first TV show and or character that made you first feel seen and heard?
I'll say two. Just as a kid was Rudy. And then as a middle schooler, on my way to be a teenager, was Moesha, was Brandy.
Sanford and Son, Red Fox reminded me of my grandfather, so we used to watch the reruns with my father all the time, and that would crack us up because we literally thought it was him on TV. and then Will Smith in The Fresh Prince was like, I wanted to be like Will in elementary and middle school.
I was a huge fan of all the TGIF shows. Was big for me, but I think, especially in terms of thinking about myself as a filmmaker, I think A Different World was really huge.
Well, I'd give a shout out to Theo and Malcolm Jamal Warner. May he rest in peace. Yeah. That show, that character.
Yes, he was fabulous. I want to thank you all so much for joining us. Can we give a round of applause to our wonderful panel?
Thank you guys so much.
I cannot believe that this is the conclusion of the 23rd Annual Martha's Vineyard African American Film Festival. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all.